Well, welcome, Adam Christing, to the podcast. It's great to have you in today.
Mark, great to see you.
I was thinking of how I should introduce you to the audience, and really, you're the ultimate hybrid. You've actually made film, so we can say filmmaker. You are a comedian. You are a public speaker, author, magician. What is it you haven't? What is not? What have we missed
Well,
there?
you're saying all this, Mark. My mom still wonders if I'm going to get a real job at some point.
Well, I think we all share, many of us share that problem. Our mothers, if we don't have a 9 to 5 job with a pension and a health care plan, our relatives don't know what it is we do. I had an aunt, Barb. She would always call my cousins and say, what does he do?
Yeah,
Does he have a good health insurance plan?
right,
And the
right.
answer is probably no. But
Yeah.
anyway,
You
you
know,
are,
as you know, we many years ago we launched Clean Comedians, and I'll never forget we had one of the top, from the Tonight Show and traveling the world. We had this juggling team, the Passing Zone, and these guys are probably, if you want to book them, it's probably $30,000. And this woman was at the show, and the next day it was so sweet, Mark. She said, could they come and do my son's birthday party? I have $50. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, they could each make 25. So yeah. And I've been grateful I think 4,000 presentations in my career, whether it's a corporate event or a fundraiser or a theater. I don't do as many comedy clubs these days, but and it's been great knowing you and seeing your success and your impact with your films and music and production.
well, thank you. You also just have a lot of expertise in interesting subjects. I mean, you made a film on Joseph Smith, for instance, and
Yes.
you're very an expert on theology, on Latter-day Saints theology, on evangelicals. You're a big critic of the rapture mentality among evangelicals. So you really do have a wide berth. You're not just a comedian or speaker. You have a lot of things going on. Plus, you're in the Hall of Fame of our alma mater, which I am not, by the way.
Well, you
You are
deserve to
in,
be. I'm going to petition Biola
well,
University about that
listen,
immediately.
listen, I understand they have their standards, and you met the standard and I didn't. But that's okay. We've accepted. I don't think John Thune is in there. I don't think Scott Derrickson's there.
Oh, wow. John
So,
Thune. He should
it's
have his
just
own wing.
it's a well, no, 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 no. It's a certain kind of person that gets in there, and the rest of us have not made that. But we're not upset or anything.
No, I
But
don't sense any
but
anger
let's
there.
let's move on from your being in the Biola Hall of Fame, and let's talk about your latest book because I want to talk about that especially because this is just out recently, and I want to hear all about it.
Well, yes, it's called The Laughter Factor, and it's been a blast. I think what I did, Mark, is I noticed that a lot of people think, well, you're funny or a comedian's funny, but I'm not really funny, or I'm only funny with family and friends. And so what we did with the book, what I did was identified 5 laugh languages, for lack of a better word, humor tactics, I call them. And it helps people. We give lots of examples of types of jokes and humor, but the key is to find what is your unique sense of humor. I think that we are made as not only human beings, but really humor beings. Like we laugh before we learn how to talk.
Right.
And so the book helps people. It's really for leaders, managers, speakers, preachers, teachers, event people, anyone who's in front of others, salespeople, of course,
Mm.
who wants to. I put it this way, Mark. Humor is a shortcut to trust. We actually feel before we think, and so if you can, like today, I had a pretty intense negotiation kind of a call, a little bit of stress, and I just said, let's to myself. I said, let's take a moment and kind of reframe this and talk human to human, and it just melts the ice. You mentioned theology. One of the shocking things in my research is Jesus himself used humor in the Gospels. I think it's 30 times. And we
Mm.
miss that because we're looking at it through stain colored glasses, we might say. And so, but you think, of, oh, well, your hero and one of mine, Reagan, master of humor. And so it's a bridge that helps us get our ideas across, but maybe more importantly, it's a way we can bond with people. So the book's fun, but also has a lot of great lessons for leaders.
Okay, so you're saying that Jesus Christ, the founder of the Christian religion, was a very funny guy, told 30, 40 jokes or whatever it was. Why are his, I don't think of Christians as being particularly funny. Why are his people not very funny?
Right. I think they are funny, like, and myself included, to laugh at some of our antics and hypocrisy. But what we miss is Jesus used all the tools of humor, sarcasm, irony, exaggeration. Like when he, if you put yourself in that culture of where food really mattered, eating kosher food, for example, the gnat was the smallest unclean food, and the camel was considered the largest, right? And so this would never play in a comedy club today, but in his culture, when he said, you strain out a gnat, like literally you clench your teeth so you don't swallow a gnat, but then you gulp down a camel, he's creating almost like, Stephen Wright's one of my favorite comedians who does all this wordplay. He's creating a funny word picture to make his point.
Interesting. What about, now you have me kind of curious about different religions. Is there a different sense of humor in different religions? What is Islam was like? What is Judaism like? Oh, yeah, have you observed anything along those lines with humor?
Well, I was speaking yesterday with someone on a different podcast, and she was cracking me up. She grew up Orthodox Jewish, and she said something like, I was raised by this guilt-inducing Jewish mom, and now I am one. And she started riffing on that. So I think wherever there's pain,
Mm,
there's and suffering, there's humor. It's I really think it's a God-given gift to be able to laugh at our pain. The shift, though, that happened somewhere in our culture is we started laughing at people instead of with them.
mm.
And so we're seeing a huge swing with people like Nate Bargatze and Jim Gaffigan, where it's like, hey, we can laugh together. We can laugh as family. So I do a lot of events in corporations where they might say, the doctors aren't getting along too well with the medical staff. We really need to laugh together. And pretty soon, what you see is they're looking at each other and laughing and nodding. And so instead of political humor, which I think there's a place for that too,
Hmm.
is what is humor that can bring us together? And so my own style is I do lots of audience participation, engagement. Like the other day, I was at an event in Michigan. There was like 1,200 people. I took the microphone, walk into the crowd. I'm just giving away silly gift cards, like, who wants a Spirit Airlines gift card? And, everybody laughs, give it away. Hey, here's a Blockbuster gift card for you, just fun stuff like that. So I don't think fun is a four-letter word. We can laugh and have a great time without someone being the butt of the joke.
Now that reminds me, I was an early investor in your space and my tube, and I just can't believe how close I
Yeah.
came to being a billionaire.
Well, I'm glad you're doing well today with AOL, so that's good.
Well, thank you. Um, well, it's so interesting because you tour the country constantly. You're now based on the East Coast. You've moved from West Coast to East Coast. Let me ask you about that quickly, by the way, and how it ties in with your book. You are, whenever I would think of the area you lived in La Mirada, California. In my mind, you were always Mr. La Mirada. You had a post office box there. You're established there. You went to school there. I mean, you have a huge network of people in that area. And you're one of my 250 friends that have moved away from California. I
Yeah.
would never, you are probably the last person in my entire friend list that I thought would move from Los Angeles area. Was that a big decision for you? And what are the larger trends happening for you to move from there to North Carolina?
Well, probably unlike many people who moved out of California because of housing and because of politics, and I might agree with some of their points. For me, it goes back to happy wife, happy life. And so for my wife, Barb, who loves nature and hiking, like where we live, Mark, in the Asheville area, we are literally surrounded within, I'd say, 10 miles of 250 waterfalls. And for me, it's been kind of a personal renaissance to see clean air, get outside more. Of course, the weather can be a factor. Like tomorrow, I have a flight. I'm like, I hope Atlanta is okay because somebody told me that Delta stands for do every leg through Atlanta. So I'm always going through Atlanta. And so to me, there's no perfect place. I did grow up in Los Angeles. I'll always be a California kid. I really grew up at the Magic Castle in Hollywood,
Hmm.
California.
Hmm.
When I was 17, I auditioned, and my hand, I'll never forget this. I was 17, and I was auditioning for the most prestigious magic club, maybe in the world. And Mark, it was like this. I had a card, and my hand was shaking so much from being nervous, I couldn't fit it in the secret slot. And I thought, there's no way I passed this audition. And Diana Zimmerman she started the program way back. But anyway, she said, your magic's not that good, but you're funny. We're going to let you in. And so 2 years later, I found myself assisting David Copperfield and learning all the ins and outs. But more importantly for me, I was exposed to variety like juggling, magic, ventriloquism, improv.
Right.
And it took me back to some of the great comedians, like going way back to learning about vaudeville. And so what I tell people is we can replace vulgarity with variety and we can involve people. And so one of my favorite things to do, I do this sometimes at corporations, is your organization has so many talented people. Maybe they play an instrument, maybe they can tell a joke or whatever. It might be a kazoo or a harmonica. But I've gone into Fortune 1000 companies and it's like, we had no idea that our in-house attorney played electric guitar. He's great. And we can bring out the talent of other people. So back to my book for a moment, it's really this shift of saying, laughter's for everyone. It's not just for the professional comedian. You don't have to just be standing in front of a red brick wall and telling 7-Eleven jokes or being really raunchy.
Mm.
We can laugh together. And so we actually came up with a quiz. People are getting a big kick out of this. But if you go to thelaughterfactor.com and
Okay.
take 4 minutes, you can take a quiz and discover your unique laugh language and then feel more comfortable, being you when you're trying to be funny.
Right. Well, we should also, as we talk about the new book, if we can just backtrack a little bit, you wrote a book years ago called Comedy Comes Clean, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah.
What's your thesis with that and with the organization that you had created back then called Clean Comedians? What's the overarching uh, principles there?
Well, quick note on that. My sister's a librarian in Hawaii, and she said, "Hey, Adam, I found your book, Comedy Comes Clean." I'm like, "That's awesome." She said, "Yeah, it was for sale for 10 cents in the library yard
Oh,
sale." So,
isn't that the
but that
worst?
but that book, I think that book sold 40,000 copies, which is not too bad.
Right.
But the concept there was you can entertain without embarrassing. So what I did with that book is I culled like one-liners, jokes, quotes, and put together a compilation of really good, clean fun. But the philosophy on Clean Comedians, our little catchphrase, it doesn't have to be filthy to be funny.
Right.
And I'll never forget this moment. I was back in Southern California, and I probably did literally 1,000 school assembly gigs. In fact, here's a bonus note: Orange County, California. I was giving a talk called Say Yes to Your Dreams, and it was full of comedy and magic and audience involvement. This is out of high school in Garden Grove. And this golf coach of the high school came up to me and he said, we've got a young man. He's very motivated. His nickname is Tiger, and it was Tiger Woods High School. So, hey,
Oh,
I could claim credit. Maybe it was that school assembly that propelled his career. But what I was going to say is this kid came up to me and he had this shocked look on his face. And I go, what's going on? He said, I didn't know comedy could be clean. So he didn't grow up like I did, exposed to Bob Newhart. And by the way, even the first two George Carlin albums are clean. You could sit down with your family and listen to the first George Carlin album. Hilarious. And so my point is not so much to try to get everybody to be clean. I believe in freedom of speech, but
right.
just to say, hey, there's an alternative. And we're seeing this blow up with, dry bar comedy and Sirius XM. You can listen to clean comedy. And so we have booked hundreds and hundreds of events for people who want to bring in after dinner entertainment, or they're doing a fundraiser and they want to raise money for their nonprofit. And so it's a wonderful tool.
But obviously, you have a premise there that comedy is not clean. A lot of comedy isn't. Right? I mean, when did that happen?
Well,
And
my premise, even before that, is, I mean, not to get too analytical, because when you get analytical, Mark, the humor dies quick.
mm,
But the word comedy is the same root as community, and the
mm,
word humor is the same root as human. So, and you were mentioning religion earlier, and I know you have a lot of expertise on culture and religion, but I think if I remember, that word religion means like to bind together. It has the idea of like we are connected.
right.
And she's not known for her stand up, but Mother Teresa said a smile is the shortest distance between two people.
Mm,
And so, but later, my premise, to use your word, is that, like, you know what? It's gone so far way back with, Andrew Dice Clay, and these comedians came in the 90s, and even still today, you can't really take, I mean, you could take your mom to a comedy club, but it's like, I remember walking out because, like, I don't want to bring my son or daughter to be exposed to that kind of stuff.
yeah.
If they choose to get into that type of humor later, great, that's their call. But I grew up, I'll never forget watching an old Laurel and Hardy clip, where I grew up, not too far from where you grew up, in at least when you've been in Los Angeles. We used to have this restaurant, I think it was called Straw Hat Pizza Palace.
Yeah.
And our whole family would go, and they had the old school movie projector, and we'd be busting up watching, Laurel and
Yeah.
Hardy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one day I was with my dad, who was probably at the time, I don't know, 65, and my grandfather, who was probably 85, and my son, who was 5. And I'm like, okay, we got 4 generations, and we're all laughing at silly stuff together. At the same time, I want to tell you, clean comedy can be very sophisticated. Like, I think Seinfeld is a genius, and he says it's harder to work clean. But I'd say if you go see him live, that's a show you could take your mom to, and just appreciate the genius of his observation and wordplay. And so my point was never really political, but more saying, hey, there is an alternative. And what I'm trying to do with the book, The Laughter Factor, and I just had this woman say, thanks for the exercise. I said, what are you talking about? She said, I'm listening to your book for the 3rd time on audio because
Mm.
it's making me laugh and it's giving me lessons as a communicator.
Wow. It's very interesting when you talk about these issues of wanting to not, uh, I guess your kids in particular, but your mom. You mentioned your mom. You don't want your mom to have to sit through the F-bomb, whatever. I learned something so interesting from Debbie Boone, of all people, Miss You Light Up My Life.
Mhm.
She said, when I was a mom, I was offended on behalf of my children with bad language. But once my kids are grown, she's like, I don't care anymore. I thought that was so insightful. It's not that we're all prudes, but we're prudes on behalf of, we don't want a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old to hear the F bomb and start saying it around the house. And so we're kind of extra prudish during those years, especially. And Hollywood doesn't seem to understand that. It's not that the whole country is prude. We just don't want to raise, hooligans.
Right.
And so I thought, like, she kind of just suspended her own tastes for those 20 years.
Right.
And once her
Right.
kids are grown, she's back to fine. She'll
Yeah.
watch whatever movie.
Well, one time I was performing at the American Comedy Festival at Johnny Carson's high school. Like, they have this event there. And Dick Cavett, who you may remember, was there because they're both from Nebraska, Carson and Cavett.
Right.
And I got to hang out with him for probably 30 minutes after the show. And he was talking about, some of the legendary, he's talking about Lucille Ball and Jack Benny and early Woody Allen and Groucho and all these greats. And he said something interesting to me. He said, on stage, those people would work clean. Some of them, he didn't name names, but some of them would be raunchy with their friends. And I think it's flipped. I think you have people who love their wife, their kids, whatever, and in their regular life, they're just clean, normal. But on
Right.
stage, there's almost this feeling like I have to outshock the other, like some of these roasts, for example. It's like it's so
Yeah.
profane,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
vulgar that it's almost like who can top the prior comedian to be as raunchy as possible, beyond raunchy, you know.
Ronald Reagan used to say once he ran for president in 1980, he stopped telling all ethnic jokes.
Mm.
And I feel like we've lost something in our culture because we're so afraid to tell ethnic jokes. What have you experienced? And I'm thinking in particular, and in the old days, it was like this group is that, and this group is lazy, and that group is drunk, and like everybody was an equal opportunity offender. It wasn't like one group was exempt. We all made fun of every ethnic group for something. We can't do that anymore. How do you feel about that?
I think you make a great point where you're commenting on earlier. We get offended on behalf of other people. I think if something offends you, tell the person who offended you, right? I remember once I had a corporate gig in Las Vegas and I zipped over and I saw Don Rickles perform. Hysterically funny. And what struck me was you had tables full of people saying, "Come after us." We're Cuban, or "Come after us," whatever their ethnic background is, because they knew in their heart of hearts he's a nice guy and this is his shtick. But I wouldn't do that today because that's just not the culture that we're in. So my personal philosophy is, if you're giving a speech, if you're giving a toast, if in doubt, leave it out. There's so much material you could do that helps people feel connected and united. But I'm not really a political satirist. I'm not an insult comedian. I do get it. Sometimes I think I get away with murder because people know I care about them. First thing I'm going to do at a company event, for example, is I'm going to affirm them. Then I'll start teasing. I'll poke fun of their unique acronyms, or this doctor has a terrible golf game, or whatever it is.
Right.
In fact, one time KPMG, the big accounting firm, I think they're like a top 4 accounting firm, they hired me to roast 10 of their retirees. And so I probably spent 20 hours prepping and did 5 minutes of roasting on each of them. But I never went after like weight or race, but I would go after something external to them, like this guy's known for wearing crazy ties or something like that. So I think today we have to be a little more delicate, but I think
Okay.
context is king.
Okay, this is very funny. This ties into my next thought, which was that, I had Jay Leno on my show many, many years ago. This is like 30 years ago. And he said, when I want to make fun of a fat person, I never say he's fat. I make fun of his tie. And the audience knows what I'm getting at, but it spares the dignity of the fat guy and doesn't make me look like a jerk.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
That's very interesting. I know you and I could probably do a lot of name dropping, but I was on a flight once with Jay Leno, and to steal a line from my friend Pete McLeod, who
Did you have a
Jay was
tie on and were you fat
funny.
at the
See, that's
time?
what we call a callback. What you just did, that's called a callback. But I'm on this flight. I'm like, there's Jay Leno sitting next to me, and I think he had performed at at Caesar's Palace, and I had probably been at Little
Yeah,
Caesars.
well, that's what I was going to say.
But I wanted to bond with Jay, and so I said, Jay, give me a suggestion. He was doing the Tonight Show, and he said LPMs. And I said, what the heck is LPMs? He said, you want to cram as many laughs per minute into your set. And so what I try to do with the book, and what I try to do when I'm speaking or entertaining, is how many LPMs can I get? And so, but back to the whole tie thing. Yeah, that's more clever than just doing a fat joke.
Mm-hmm.
So here's an example. Let's say I'm emceeing a big corporate gathering and we're at a nice 5-star resort and they keep bringing food, food, food. Rather than saying, you're fat, I talk about, I might do an old joke like, I went to the fitness center during our break and I got on the scale and it said, 1 at a time, please. Everybody's going to laugh because that's how they feel about how they're overeating. So that's just my personality, though. I'm probably not going to go after someone unless I know everyone loves this person. I can have some fun with them.
Yeah.
But if you're ever in doubt, one of the 5 laugh languages is called poking. And it's a guaranteed winner if you start by poking fun at yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I call this, think of the success in our culture of someone like a Brene Brown, who talks so much about vulnerability and openness. I call this little piece authenticity. If you can start by poking fun at yourself, it's just like this instant thing of like, okay, she's real. She's
Right.
been through some failures. I can relate to her.
Right. Were your parents funny?
Yes, as you know, I lost my dad about a year ago. He was a masterful joke teller. My mom is like a living Lucille Ball, where I don't know what she's going to say.
Hmm.
And maybe the funniest person I've known. I don't think she would do it on stage, but like I was in Southern California and I was checking on my mom. She had some health concerns, and she said, she texted me. She said, "I'm prepping for this, I don't know, banker's gig." And she goes, "Hey, you left your toothbrush here. I've only used it twice." I'm like, "It's my
And
mom.
she's what? She's 80 something years old.
She's 89 years old." Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh. So you really get it from both of them in a
I
way.
really do. Yeah. I think well, I know you have more kids than I do. I have four kids. They all turn out different, you know?
Yeah.
But I want to circle back we were talking about this. I was mentioning this vulnerability piece. So I could go up like, and you could really do this. You could talk about the Reagan movie. You could talk about your involvement in the Passion of the Christ. I could boast in front of an audience like I've written these books. But if I say something like a true story, if I say I made a movie, I was the co-director, the co-writer, so I cast myself in the movie. True story.
Right.
My acting was so bad, I got cut out of my own film and became the narrator.
Hmm.
If I open with something like that, it's like, okay, it gets a laugh. And it's like, this guy's real. So our tendency, especially in today's divisive culture, is to open with strength. But as whether you're a speaker, a teacher, preacher, whatever, just open up your heart a little bit.
Hmm. Hmm.
Believe it or not, I'm going to quote Howard Stern, even though nobody would call him a clean comedian. But I was struck one time hearing him say, in your career, if you want to get a lot further, you need to open up a whole lot more.
Mm. But it's increasingly difficult to do that these days because things are documented and held against you, and a lot of people get into trouble for saying things online. They get canceled. So that's easier said than done in the climate we're in today, wouldn't you say?
Well, yes and no. I think if you open up, like there used to be a time where you can't talk about having gone through a divorce, you can't talk about a struggle with an alcohol addiction, let's say, or whatever. But if you open up about yourself, this is going to sound corny, but
Hmm.
I love this, Mark. I love thinking of the word intimacy as intimacy. So when you open up and you talk about your funny flops, for example, and I'm not talking about self destructive humor, but I'm talking about
Right.
self effacing humor.
Right.
Uh, it's just, it's just awesome. It's like this. Uh, the other day, I was with Dr. Lev, who I believe is like number two in the drug czar office of the White House. And she was with a group of mostly, I would say, Christian people. And she's, I think, Orthodox Jewish. And she
Mm.
says, hey, like over 1,000 people. And she says, I know we don't agree on the coming of the Messiah. She said, I know many of you think he's already come, and I believe the Messiah is coming. And she said, when he shows up, let's just ask him, is this your second or first visit? And
Right.
it's like everybody laughed. She's kind of talking about herself. That's what I'm talking about is humor where you kind of reveal yourself a little bit. It's winsome.
Right. Right. Well, where are we today in the culture of humor? I feel like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, we reached a place where I know Seinfeld said he would never do colleges. A lot of comedians wouldn't do colleges. There's just no humor there. Everything is offensive. Have we recovered from that, or are we still in that mode?
I think we are recovering from it, but yeah, it's. I noticed this. People think it's just colleges, but it's not. I had a company one time. This has only happened one time where I refunded the money, but they said we want you to have some fun with our top brass. So I have this lie detector. I think we did it together one time with Adam Carolla, if you remember. But I have this lie detector, and I had this gentleman, take the lie detector test, and I'm like, hey, Mike, have you ever stolen anything from the company? And he says no, and it goes like he's lying, right? It's
Right,
totally silly.
right.
But but some of the lawyers within this company said, "Oh no, you're," and they brought up this person's race, which had nothing to do with the
Ooh,
gag at all.
wow.
And they said, "You're making him look bad." And that guy, the one with the light, he was laughing the most. And so this was for a video. And so I just said, you know what? Here's a refund. And so the problem is we still have this spot you referred to it where we get offended on behalf of other people.
Right.
And we need to stop doing that. At the
It-
same time, this is the game changer, right? Just like I think Spielberg once said, the future of film is in your hand. Like a kid can make a
right.
movie
Right.
with their iPhone.
Yeah.
Some of you notice with your friends, you're sharing funny memes and clips and YouTube clips and TikTok and all that kind of thing. And so I like the fact that humor has become way more available to people. What I'm trying to do with the laughter factor really is help people see, wow, I do have a sense of humor, and maybe mine is more into wordplay, and maybe yours is more into telling exaggerated stories like a Robin Williams. Amplifies is another laugh language.
Yeah.
Is let people know like you can unlock the power of humor when you know what your laugh language is. I must tell you, since we know each other's families, my son James just graduated from college, and we said, James, you got to read the 5 love languages. So
Gary Smalley. Gary
yeah,
Smalley? Yeah.
yeah, he only sold 20 million copies. So we got James a copy of the 5 love languages, and we go, buddy, read it. Let us know. So he does. And we say, all right, what is your love language? And he said, Mom, Dad, it's Venmo.
That's funny. That's funny.
I wanted to make you laugh at least once or twice
Yeah.
during this interview, Mark.
Well, it's interesting. I've been thinking in talking to you. My father was a minister, missionary, and kind of came from that very, very hardcore, maybe fundamentalist world of the 1940s, 50s. And yet, oddly, he was very funny,
Yeah.
which doesn't really fit in with that stereotype we have of that crowd.
Now, was he funny in public, like when he was speaking or preaching?
Yeah, with people, he would tell jokes, and as a kid, I wasn't really allowed to watch a lot of movies or, rock music was evil, but he would slip me like Mad Magazine. He would go out and buy like used Mad Magazine books and like sneak them to me like without my mom seeing them. So
Yeah.
so there was and I don't know where he got it from because his parents were immigrants. So it wasn't like his dad was sitting around home cracking jokes. But I think he somehow acquired that ability to really tell a good joke and a good story.
Yeah.
And yet I don't think of that community he came from as being real joke. I don't, yeah, am I wrong? Just don't think of Christians as being very funny.
Well, I think
Is that a
historic-
stereotype that's not true?
Yeah, I think that's not true. Look. Look today. The hottest comedian in America is Nate Bargatze. His
Right.
dad's a minister.
But that's
Way up.
but that's unusual. This is a recent phenomenon. For the last 40 years, what comedians were very devout Christians?
Well, I think if you go way back, Bob Newhart was a very devout Catholic man. There've been many others. I think humor is in every culture, and maybe I think we've gotten so uptight about kind
Right.
of us versus them politically, faith-wise, that we don't feel comfortable doing it. And when we think of comedy today, we think of stand-up. When I think of comedy, I think of my mom, my dad, and being exposed to like go to a Broadway show, and there might be lots of great humor. Or think of the movies like take a Will Ferrell movie like Elf. It's like that's become a family classic. It's hilarious.
Right.
So back to you mentioned Christian humor. There's an interesting passage. I've never heard a sermon on it, but I think it's interesting, where the Apostle Paul says, don't let any vulgar word come out of your mouth, except that which is appropriate for the setting. I mean, that's my paraphrase. And so there might be a joke that I would tell a friend that I'm not going to tell at church or on stage. It's like, know your audience. Goes back
Yeah.
to that.
Right. Yeah. Thinking about Reagan, we talked earlier about him. He had a joke that he would tell. One of his aides told me the joke, and he would only tell it. He segregated his jokes. Like He had kind of crudish humor he would do only with the fellas. But if there was a woman in the room, he would never tell that joke. So he had kind of an old-fashioned sensibility about it. So he stopped doing ethnic jokes. He would only tell jokes about his own people, the Irish, once he became president.
Right, right.
And then he would tell these jokes, if it was slightly off color, he would only tell it with the guys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And don't you think the moment that he won versus who was it, Mondale?
Mondale and Carter, yeah. Carter and then Mondale.
But when his moment of humor was just like this, the audience is like, this guy's smart, this guy's likable, funny, acknowledging his age at that time. And so it's like, I've experienced humor as an instant, like, game changer, shifter.
But again, but Adam, again, back to I think that Reagan and Jesus are like anomalies in their communities, because I don't think of most Republicans or conservatives as being very funny. I don't think most Christians as being funny, and yet Jesus and Reagan are funny. But I don't think their followers are very funny.
I don't think of Republicans or Democrats as being very funny. There's so much anger, and I think most Americans are just checked out. Unless you have a constant diet of Fox News or MSNBC or whatever, which is, to me, so many of our outlets are just agitation machines, right?
Okay, but Rush Limbaugh was funny, and
yes.
What I noticed at the time when Rush first hit the scene, he would have all these crazy songs making fun of liberals.
Yeah,
he had like a Ted Kennedy drinking song, and I just noticed, I felt for about 5 or 10 years the political left was just like dumbstruck by this, because it was almost like, you can't do that. You can't make fun of us. We make fun of you. SNL made fun of Gerald Ford falling off the airplane, made fun of Nixon, but to have the right make fun of the left was a new phenomenon. It hasn't been repeated very much, but I think it took them a while to recover. And then pretty soon, then you had Colbert and the others and Jon Stewart mocking the right again. But I think that Limbaugh threw the whole equation off with his humor.
I think you might be right about that. Very funny. But what's deeper than that, Mark, I think, is it goes back to comedy and community, right? So there's like in jokes. And so if you're with a bunch of conservatives, you feel safe to make fun of the liberals. If you're with a bunch of liberals, you feel safe to make fun of. But back to Jesus for a moment, like his biggest target was the hypocrites.
The Pharisees.
Yeah.
Right.
And let's face it, we are all hypocrites. So going back to my premise, if you make fun of yourself in your own hypocrisy, like I rarely use this joke, but I was with a faith-based group recently, and I said, I didn't go to Promise Keepers. I said I would. And so for that group, it's like that works. And so what I'm trying to do is kind of broaden the community and say, I would love to do something across all 50 states, for example, where we're laughing across America, where it's like I have neighbors on my street who are hardcore right, hardcore left, libertarian, whatever. Is if you had a party and just got everyone laughing together, we're rehumanized,
One of my favorite humor in the Old Testament, I think it's the prophet Elijah. Remember, he calls down fire from heaven, and his stuff is destroyed. And then the false prophets, they call down heaven fire, and nothing happens.
Right.
If I have this correctly, and I think Elijah says, "Where is your God?" Maybe he's on the toilet.
Exactly.
Like, that's some pretty serious sarcasm in a very serious religious setting. This is like a religious ceremony, basically.
Yeah. And what about when the angel of the Lord appears to Gideon, and he's like hiding, I forget where he was, in a well or a basement or whatever, and the angel of the Lord says, "Oh, mighty, valiant warrior," addresses him. It's like, there's a passage that says, our God is seated in the heavens laughing. And so if you have an enlarged view of God, I really think you see humor, you see joy, you see light, you see judgment. It's a much bigger picture. So my point is not that humor is everything, but it's a beautiful thing. It makes life, variety is the spice of life. So that's why probably for me, variety humor is like my favorite.
But
Like,
is it a modern luxury that gives us the space to even be humorous? I mean, if you're in the 1800s and you're working 16 hours a day in a coal mine and you come home, it's like, do you even have the bandwidth or the luxury of being funny and joking around? Or, I mean, so much of human history has been just grinding through a day. Whereas now, you can go to a comedy club, you can watch Seinfeld, you have time, you have the luxury of humor. No?
no, I don't think so. When humor was probably at its height in the US was during the Great Depression, right?
Really?
Was like, yeah, that's when the all the great, silent and then talkie movies came out. People would go to the theater, vaudeville, and it was like all the top acts were like comedians, clown, Red Skelton, all these people was booming. And so what they say in the comedy business is a couple things. Funny is money. And when times are down, laughter's up. That's when people need to laugh more than ever.
Hmm.
I'll tell you quick. Somebody, I think it was Rick Reynolds, had a great special. Only the truth is funny. And but this happened to me a few months ago, and I'm not going to name names because it's a dear client, and I want them to keep hiring me. But it was a big anniversary celebration, Mark, and they this really happened in Florida. It was very cold, unusually cold there. But to celebrate the anniversary, they had these butterflies hidden in, like, say, 50 boxes. And they had the founder of this company. It was a beautiful thing. And they had someone like read some beautiful words, and they had someone playing an instrument. And we were going to take the lid off and surprise these wonderful attendees and have 500 butterflies float into the air. When they took the lid off, no butterflies appeared.
Hmm.
And we look in the box, and they're shivering and they're cold. They're huddling together. And so people started giggling, and then they started shaking the boxes, and a couple butterflies fell onto the cement. And then one butterfly majestically flew up in the air, and within a second, a bird snatched it and ate it. And we went from this kind of serious celebration mode into everybody started laughing. And I know that's going to be a memory for that company. In fact, the CEO got up and said something like, well, this is a moment we'll never forget. And so sometimes something that seems like a failure, we can laugh about it together. Sometimes we need space to do that.
Right.
I personally think we're going to look back at these tumultuous, rough times, politics, all that. I think we're going to have a lot of laughs, whether we're talking about the right or the left.
What about in totalitarian societies, Nazi Germany, communist China, the Soviet Union? What was the humor situation like in those kinds of places?
It's funny, as you were saying that, the first thing that hit me was like humorless, humorless, humorless.
Right.
So I don't think that's a coincidence, right?
Mm.
Whereas if you look at Churchill, master of humor, master of sarcasm, insult, and obviously that's not the core. The core difference is ideology. But if you're living in a place where laughter is not allowed, probably freedom is not there as well.
Mm. In my research for the Reagan film, I met Yakov Smirnoff,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who was the great comedian. And so he told me that he actually provided jokes to Reagan through Reagan's aide, Dana Rohrabacher. And
Yeah,
he
yeah.
would feed him a steady stream of jokes making fun of the Soviet Union and Gorbachev.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and Reagan would use these jokes with Gorbachev. They're actually very insulting, but they're funny.
Yeah.
So and Gorbachev, he put up with it, but he was not terribly. And he finally he would say, "Mr. President, I heard that joke last time. You already told me that last time. It was like enough already." But this was Yakov Smirnoff's little revenge
That's
against the
cool.
Soviet Union.
That's cool. Yeah.
But so you're right. So I think authoritarian people don't do very well with being mocked. Is that fair enough?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And this is where I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this is where if you can make fun of yourself, you beat everybody to the punch, and
Right.
almost instant likability.
You know who has done this masterfully over the years? Not necessarily with humor, but with making fun of himself is Bono of U2.
Yes,
Bono has always been 3 steps ahead of saying about him what you think, but haven't gotten around to saying yet.
I love that example. Yeah,
He,
yeah,
he, he will say, "Oh yeah, the rock star who's trying to feed babies in Africa." He'll make fun of
yeah,
himself, the
yeah.
stereotypes of himself.
I did an event one time for this like international gathering, and I was the MC, and I was quite nervous. I thought I have to nail the opening. I walk up to the podium and I stumbled. I didn't fall on my face, but it was obviously a trip. And I'm thinking, oh no, I've just lost credibility. And no joke, as I'm walking back down after I introduced the president or whatever, I stumbled a little bit again. I thought, I can't believe it. So I'm nervous, sweating, and I'm kind of backstage. And I text a friend of mine, Krista, who's an expert in the world of public speaking. And this was her advice. She said, do it again. And when I did it the third time, it's like, oh, he's making fun of himself. And then they're thinking, is he doing this on purpose? So I think just being real is gold. I think of so many of the great survivors. What's the Viktor Frankl, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
life is suffering, but it's also blissful. And so if you can combine that, if you can find like I want to be the opposite of someone who's paranoid. I want to be pronoia. I want to find that silver lining. Again, that's my personality. I think other people, it's fine if they're doing political satire or
Right.
whatever. But I think what we're missing most of all is laughing with people instead of laughing at them. And that's really one of the shifts I want to see happen from my book. And I'm happy to tell you, we've formed a community of laugh launchers who are taking this stuff into their whatever, their school, their church, their
Mm.
business, and finding like I mean, crazy things. You could do some silly things at work, like trying to think of an example here, like instead of having a dinner or a lunch, it's like, bring your favorite breakfast cereal to lunch. It seems like the dumbest thing. And yet people are like, oh my gosh, you're into Fruit Loops. I'm into Lucky
Mm.
Charms. It's like we
Mm.
can laugh together, even if we don't see eye to eye on every issue.
Mm. Yeah, what about we're in a generation of a lot of young men who don't quite know how to deal with the other sex, so how to ask a girl out. It's all on social media, and there's an awkwardness. But is correct me if I'm wrong. Humor is very attractive in a young man, a young boy, young man, on the part of women. Isn't that correct?
It's funny you say that. I remember being in a youth group as a kid and being a class clown. And some of the other guys got upset with me. And I'm like, what's going on? They're like, all the girls are liking you because you're funny. And so there is something that I think what happens when you display a little bit of humor, it's a sign of intelligence. But the real, like a moment ago when you did that little callback, if you listen, if you're a young man and you're listening to a woman and then you replay something she said, chances are you're going to make her laugh and smile, but also you're sending a signal like this person's listening. The
Mm.
best comedians are the best listeners. They're listening to what's happening in the room and they're calling back to it. Here's another example. I'm going to be with a group of about 30 people next week for a very small audience, but I'm doing a brief keynote message.
Hmm.
If I take the time to memorize each person's first name, I could go up there and talk about calculus, wouldn't matter. But if I end saying, and thank you, Mark, and thank you, Julio, and thank you, Tiffany, and remember them by name, a friend of mine did that. And then he started thanking the wait staff at the hotel. It's just like, wow. So what humor does, it says to your friends, your customers, whoever is like, this person gets it. They're like
Mm.
tuned in.
Mm. Hmm. And so your life day to day, I mean, you are, how many days a year would you say you're on the road?
Well, growing up, Mark, my kids called me Uncle Adam. Is that a good sign? No, I'm probably on the road about at least 100 days a year, and
Wow.
so oftentimes that means I'm at the LAX or Atlanta airport. But there is something. I'm not a drug taker. I've never tried cocaine, but I have to tell you, when you're on stage and the audience, it feels like they're in the palm of your hand. It,
Mhm.
it, it is magical. It is like a rush. So there's that. And also the fact that I forgot to save money in my 40s. So I'm on the road earning money, saving money. But I've been so blessed. I've got to introduce and open for people like Martin Short, and your friend Alice Cooper got to MC one of his fundraising concerts in Phoenix. And it's just been a wild ride to one day I had a gig at Caesar's Palace in Lake Tahoe for an insurance group, and the next morning I was at a junior high school in Riverside, California. I'm like, I'm the same guy, but it's been a great vehicle.
And you've also thinking through not so much at comedy clubs, right, but more emceeing type work, opening for people. But were you ever a comedy club person?
Here's what we did with comedy clubs. We just rent them. We would rent the Comedy Store in Hollywood or the Ice House in Pasadena, and we would pack it out. We would put in, clean comedians, and the owners would be like, I've never heard of these guys, but they're packing it out. And so I remember one time renting a auditorium, I think seated 3,000 people, and we had 2,900 people.
Mm.
So business people were bringing their whole group. A church might bring a bus full of people, and so it's like there's another saying in comedy. In fact, my friend Sandy Chanley, who produced some great HBO specials, she would often say, "Funny is funny." And so
Hmm.
if you just make it funny, you're going to have an audience, no question. And then my point is like, why not make it funny that we can all enjoy?
Hmm.
Now I'm feeling self-conscious, Mark, that I haven't been that funny on this podcast. This has felt like, more like I'm on 60 Minutes or something without a lawyer present.
Well, we're analyzing humor and your funniness, and by the way, you haven't told us yet. On behalf of one of your relatives, like my aunt, do you have health insurance?
It comes and goes. I'll just put it that way. Yeah.
Do you have a pension? Do you have a plan?
I think it was one of the funniest comedians ever. Jackie Mason said I met with my financial advisor, and he said, "You have enough money to last the rest of your life, unless you buy something."
I would get these letters periodically from my dad and from my aunts, and it was always sincere, and you knew they were well-meaning, but it was always like, do you have, a 401k? Is there a plan here? Is there do you have what was it they would say, benefits? Do you have
Right, right.
benefits? Is this a job with benefits? I'm like, no, it's not a job with benefits.
Yeah.
And it was very
Well,
important.
I think I'm wired like you are. I'm always going to choose opportunity over security. And I mean, I lost a house. I've I've lost all kinds of things, but then I've made a lot of income over the years too. And so it's been a bit of a roller coaster. My wife is the stable one who keeps, putting money aside. But it's been such a wonderful blessing. I can't think of another word to describe it, to see people laughing together. And sometimes I'll tell you, Mark, I don't think our country, I don't think North America or even the world is as rotten or divided as we might think. When you go into a nonprofit that's helping dig, clean water for people, or when you're with a group like Mercy Ships, that's like a floating hospital helping people get surgeries they could never get, and you're seeing people give money to great causes. Like I don't hear that much political talk when I'm at these events. Actually, I think a lot of that is whatever you want to call it, clickbait or the rage machine. When you're laughing with someone, it's hard to be mad at them.
Mm, mm. So you would like to see politicians and world leaders spend more time together laughing, going to a comedy show
Oh,
together. You think that would solve a lot of problems?
absolutely, absolutely. And I don't know what's going to happen with the white. They didn't do the press. Did they reschedule the White House press dinner? I don't know.
They did, but I don't know if it's going to happen. I feel like
Yeah.
it's lost its momentum.
Well, Oz Perlman was scheduled to be the headline entertainer, and he's phenomenal. And I've had the privilege of introducing him three times.
Mm.
totally different groups. I mean, one was very religious, one was educational. But here's why I bring him up. We want to feel like kids again.
Mm,
He would tell someone like, think of your first crush in third grade, and then he
right.
would say, by the way, Julie says hi, and the president of the university would like have his mind blown. And so to feel the freedom to just be amazed and to
Mm,
experience wonder is just it's such a good thing. Maybe that's why I gravitated toward magic. Is one time I was in Hollywood Magic where that was the place when I was growing up. In fact, Muhammad Ali got into doing card tricks and he would hang out there. But they had this very boring guy named Earl who was behind the counter. And Earl was not a comedian, not a joke teller, but I kept hearing people laugh. And I go, what is going on with this guy? His magic, like, he'd hand you four aces and they would disappear in your hand and you'd laugh because of the power of surprise. And by the way,
mm.
that's another of the laugh languages is you don't have to be a professional comedian to surprise somebody with a note or a fun gift or something. We can all enjoy good, clean fun.
Mm. Well, this has been quite an unexpected tour into the world and the history of comedy, and we've even covered, the intersection of comedy and religion. And what better person to take on that tour, to go on that tour with, than with you? You've managed to bring those two disparate worlds together. And today, the headline from today will be Adam Christing calls on world leaders and political enemies to attend comedy shows to make the world a better place together.
Yes,
I think there's
yes.
something there. If I
Yeah.
could wave my magic wand, if I could make something a law, I would require all congressmen and women to live in the Washington, D.C. area, preferably maybe on a military base together,
There you
because
go.
that would cause their spouses and their children to be involved in activities together. And
Yeah.
it's very hard to yell at your opponent on TV if your children are in Little League Baseball together and
Yes.
your wives are in
Yes.
bridge club together.
Yes.
And I know it's unconstitutional, but I would require Congress people to live in the same town. And I think we'd have a really different, not that they wouldn't disagree, but they would do so knowing, shoot, if I mouth off to this guy, my wife's going to yell at me tomorrow because their wives, they are in a club together.
Well, I
And
remember, I know you're tight with Dennis Prager, his dinners in black and white. And to me, that wasn't even about black people, white people. It was about the idea like when you have dinner with someone, whatever their race is, it's like suddenly some of these areas that separate us, it's like, hey, pass the sugar,
right,
You just feel community. And I don't think it's a coincidence that many of the events I do, it's around a meal, right? So I'm often the after dinner speaker or the after dinner entertainer. And so it's
yeah.
like when you're breaking bread together, good things happen. And maybe we need to get back to that. I know for me as a kid, it's like you were sitting down at dinner as a family. You might, be out playing before or after, and maybe dad's going to watch TV, but like,
Right.
and some of my best memories are laughing with my sister, probably because I was like hiding the peas under my potato so I wouldn't have to eat them, but just like memories that you create
Right.
by sharing good times together.
Now, there are limitations. I don't think FDR could have charmed Hitler out of doing what he did. So there are granted limitations on this idea,
Yes,
but we should still
yes.
try, right?
And some of my favorite humor was, I mean, look at Chaplin and later Mel Brooks. We should poke fun at the abuse of authority,
Right.
uh, but let's not forget to have some fun at our own expense too.
Well, Adam, I hope your book, The Laughter Factor, does, I'm sure it's doing great, but I hope it does even better and that our folks listening to this broadcast will pick up a copy as well. And thanks for spending some time with us.
Hey, thank you, Mark. I appreciate it, and nice job on the callback.
Great to be with you.
Thanks.